1212, a boy named Nicholas took up the cross and convinced thousands of young men and boys to join him on a crusade. They marched from here in Cologne all the way to Rome, but many died on the way, and some became unconvinced when the sea failed to part for them at Genoa. But some did make it to see the Pope, however he just told them to go home. Similar movement, however, was happening over in France when Stephen of Cloyes again inspired thousands of young men and boys to join him on a crusade. But they met with King Philip of France and again the same year were told to go home. This is what the old accounts say, however, but it's very hard to know whether or not to believe them. After all, these reports would later develop into what is known as the Children's Crusade, and later stories would have them being sold off in Tunisia and that sort of thing. But this wasn't the strangest crusade. In my opinion, that honour should go to the first crusade, the People's Crusade. This crusade began when a priest from France became inspired by the Pope's call for a crusade, so he began preaching in favour of one, and he was organising a crusade of his own alongside the Prince's Crusade, which was organised by the nobility of Europe, and that would be the official First Crusade. Well, he preached on a donkey, but still got tens of thousands of people to join him, and even some knights, and they all met here in Cologne. Now, once in Cologne, however, the armies began to massacre Jews up and down the Rhine. Although many people just joined in with the Crusaders in massacring the Jews, in Worms the bishop offered the Jews sanctuary in his palace, and in Mainz the people shut the town gates. But the crusading army proved to be too large and thousands were killed. Although many nobles and clergy condemned the attacks, the Crusaders probably didn't fear repercussions, and that's because one of their leaders, Amico, believed that the world was coming to an end soon. And one chronicler said that Amico gave himself the title the world's last emperor. But there seems to have been a strange mix of people who joined in this crusade. Now, of course, there were many peasants and knights and people from all walks of life, but there were also some nuns, and one woman who followed Amico apparently found a goose that possessed the Holy Spirit. Now, according to Guibert of Nogent and Albert of Aachen, this goose and even a goat apparently were set to lead the people to the Holy Land, and they had quite a large sect following them. But the goose at least died in Lorraine, and it was eaten shortly afterwards. Anyway, Peter the Hermit, the man who started the whole thing, had hoped to, once he was in Cologne, recruit more Germans into the crusade. But one man, Walter San of War, could not wait, and he marched an army straight to Constantinople, and he successfully made it there, but pillaged the countryside around Belgrade on the way. So the main force set off a few days later in April, and they successfully made it through Hungary. But in modern-day Serbia, there was a dispute over the price of a pair of shoes, and a riot broke out in which about 4,000 people were killed in the aftermath. Nico's armies, meanwhile, were devastated in Hungary in response to them pillaging the countryside there, and the survivors went on to attack Belgrade. They had now been marching for about 2 months, so the ruler of the city of Nice offered to escort them to Constantinople if they avoided his city. The Crusaders agreed, but they still set fire to a few mills in the countryside, and they were beaten in the following battle. However, about 20,000 or so people seem to have made it to Constantinople, but as soon as they made it past Constantinople, they were defeated by the Seljuks, and most of them were killed in their first battle against the Muslims.